Flyers.
Yeah!
He scores!
A two-hand jam!
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night, Thursday edition on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Glad to have you guys on board the show today. Oh, my goodness. We got a lot of basketball talk to get to throughout the show. Scoop B, Brandon Robinson, NBA insider with Bally Sports, will join us coming up at 6:20 to get more into the NBA Finals, plus the latest Ben Simmons rumor and speculation. You know, Scoop B always has some nuggets for us when he joins the show here on 97.3 ESPN. NBA Finals tied 2-2, all that, plus I'll give you guys a little insight into my top 10 Thursday. Check out the full article right now on 97.3 ESPN.com, and you can let me know if you agree or disagree. At Josh Hennig on Twitter. Text board is open, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Get on the conversation right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation there as well. So, obviously, last night, we'll get to the Ben Simmons stuff in just a minute. But before we get to the Ben Simmons stuff, I just got to say, last night's NBA Finals was incredible. But it was incredible because of the players who were in it. And I understand that for some people, because you don't have the Lakers or you don't have LeBron or you don't have a big name, the casuals are a little bit disconnected, right? They're a little bit, shall I call it, out on the whole thing. But I'd like to remind you guys that the NBA and basketball and any sport is about the players who are in it and not about the teams and the marquee. A lot of times, if you go to a movie, you may go there because it's a certain movie franchise or because a certain actor or actress in it or a certain director that you like. But those things don't always keep you interested. It's the other people involved. So you got to think about the NBA Finals as a movie theater and look at who the star attractions is. The two-time league MVP, future Hall of Famer, up-and-coming superstar. And it was a lot of fun last night. But, man, that game came down to one thing, guys. And it was the same thing that doomed the Sixers in their playoff run as well. Now, everyone wants to point to Ben Simmons, but think about this. The Suns had 17 turnovers last night. The Bucks had 5. The Suns committed 24 personal fouls. Meanwhile, the Bucks shot 24 for 29. If Phoenix literally commits a few less turnovers and a few less fouls, they could have won the game. I'll never understand for the life of me why something so simple gets so overlooked so often. I'll never understand it. I'll never understand how you have a situation where you're literally turning the ball over at a rate of 3 times more than the other team. You're committing fouls to the point where you've committed double more fouls than them. In a game where the refs actually were not calling as many fouls as you would think. And all of a sudden, you lost a game by single digits, and you could have done a couple things differently, and you would have won the game. That's why the fundamentals of the game are so important. That's why these details that some people don't like to focus on are important. I understand some of you don't care about Ben Simmons' defense. You only care about his scoring. And some of you don't care about how many times Steph Curry has committed turnovers because he's an epic three-point shooter. I understand that. But I want to bring you guys inside of the game. And a game can swing on a number of situations. And while Giannis's big block will be the highlight of that game for decades to come, it should be more than a footnote that the Suns had 17 turnovers and the Bucks had 5. If the Suns commit 2 less turnovers and they had 24 personal fouls, if they commit 4 less personal fouls, they could have won the game. That's how small the margins are in this series. And that's why it's been an incredible series to watch. And as I told Brian Topor a couple of days ago here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN, I'm conflicted on this series because I think there's no real villain in this series. There's nobody to root against. You want Giannis to win. He's a likable. He's got a likability factor. You want Chris Paul to win. He's a future Hall of Famer. You like Devin Booker, like DeAndre Ayton, but you also like Chris Middleton. Drew Holiday's a former Sixer. Monty Williams, his story is incredible off the court. Budenholzer, we're all conflicted on him, for goodness sake. So this is an amazing series, and I just hope it goes 7 games. I know I picked the Suns to win in 6, but there's a part of me that just wants the series to go 7, and I'm just going to enjoy the ride. Josh Hennig here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. We'll dive more into the NBA Finals coming up at 6:20 with NBA insider Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, and we'll get into this Ben Simmons stuff. He keeps that text coming, 609-403-0973. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation. Now, Mike Gill played this audio a little bit earlier in the day today, and I wanted to bring it back because Israel Gutierrez is a very interesting source because, one, he has covered the NBA for many years now, and he's been on the sidelines. He's been a reporter. He's been a writer, covered the league for a while. He was on the Greg Cody podcast. You might remember Greg Cody from his time with the Dan Le Batard show on ESPN radio. And when Israel made these comments, and I heard them the first time earlier today with Mike Gill, I was really surprised of the lack of oomph he brought with it. Because the way he says it, and listen to not just what he says, but how he says it, it tells you something about his mindset when it comes to the 3-time All-Star, 2-time All-Defensive First-Team player that is Ben Simmons.
People don't like Ben Simmons in the league. His teammates don't like Ben. Like, there's just something about him there. Like, he is an unlikable dude. And in that locker room, he's unlikable. And, like, if you think about it, Greg, like, what coach have you covered that you ask them, hey, can you win a championship with this guy? And they say, I don't know, or I don't know how to answer that. I mean,
people don't like him. His teammates don't like him. That's a strange development to come down. Now, I want to preface this by saying I don't think at any point in time that anybody is as loved or as hated as anybody may try to say or suspect they are. Because of the reality that where are you getting your information from? See, we don't know exactly who Israel talked to that gave him that information. So I don't know if Ben Simmons is as disliked as he might want to say. And I got to tell you guys, there's a part of me that wonders how realistic that comment is. But there's another part of me that has to wonder, is it just part of the bigger picture? You know, Ben Simmons is a guy who has a very closed group. He is somebody who has a tight-knit group of people around him. And I have to wonder if he comes off as aloof, if he comes off as somebody who doesn't care what other people have to say or think about him. Is he someone who looks around the league and says, I'm good with where I'm at? And Listen to this comment from Michael Lee yesterday. And I want to tie these two together because I think understanding the bigger picture is just as important as who's going to acquire Ben Simmons. Take a listen. This is Michael Lee from the Washington Post yesterday on the Sports Bash.
I think one of the main problems, the Sixers have had over the years is that Ben has such a tight circle. He keeps everything, with his family and with his really, really close friends. So he's not really trying to get outside help when it comes to his game. And if he's not going to do that, then how is he ever going to grow? Somebody's got to get in his ear and say that. So far, nobody's been willing to do it. And I just don't think it's going to happen in Philadelphia.
Now, with that being said, listen again to what Israel Gutierrez said.
People don't like Ben Simmons in the league. His teammates don't like Ben. Like there's just something about him there. Like he is an unlikable dude. And
so is he an unlikable dude because he's a bad person or he's a jerk? Or is he an unlikable dude because when everybody wants to go out and have a good time, Ben Simmons doesn't want to join the party? And I mean this. I don't think at any point anyone was trying to trash Ben Simmons unless they're Jimmy Butler, who obviously holds grudges longer than any Italian I've ever met. And last time I checked, I don't even know if Jimmy has any Italian in him, but man, he holds a grudge better than anybody I've ever met. And I got to tell you, if Ben Simmons is that disliked, is it because of how he handles his business? Think about it, how when you have people who come from different cultural backgrounds, I've had this conversation about Carson Wentz in the past. Where you come from has an impact on how you treat other people. And you think about Ben Simmons, he grew up in a world that's very different than a lot of other players. He didn't come from poverty. He didn't come from having to scratch and claw his way to the top. And because of that, I think that maybe he is more like Carson Wentz than we realize, that his personality lends him to be a little bit more obtuse, to be a little bit more antisocial. Hey, man, I'm going to go hang out with me and my boys. I'm going to go out and do things with me and my family. I'm going to go do things with me and my girl. While the other guys are like, hey, let's go do this. Hey, we're going to go do that. We're going to hang out. If you look at the vlogs from the bubble, Tobias Harris was the guy who was spending time with the other players in the bubble. Tobias Harris was the one who was extra involved in different things off the court. It wasn't Ben Simmons. And in fact, when Matisse Thybulle, who by the way is also Australian like Ben Simmons, you would think there might be some national, communal something there. He acknowledges Ben Simmons. Ben's like, yeah, what's up, man? Not in a mean way, but just I'm in my own little world way. So is Ben Simmons just not able to connect with people and get along with people because he just doesn't know how to? I don't know if Ben Simmons is a bad guy. As far as I know, he's never done anything that's legitimately a bad thing. But when your perception is a certain way, it becomes reality. And if Ben Simmons is perceived as a bit of a obtuse jerk, whether he really is or not, Ben might be the nicest human being in the world. But when you go out there and you miss free throws and you don't take a dunk and you pass it off and you go out there and you don't play up to your level of ability, you won't take help in learning to shoot better, become a better basketball player, you only want to train with certain people, you only surround yourself with certain people, you have a chaotic love life that has been a subject of TMZ tabloids for years now. All of these things packaged together, it just has to make you wonder, is it really worth it? For the 76ers, this is the thing they're considering. This is the reason why we are where we are today. The reason why the reports from Shams Charania and Mark Stein came out. The reason why the Sacramento Bee wrote what they wrote. The reason why all of these different reports are coming out. Because it just may be that the Sixers have had enough. And because Daryl Morey was not here when they drafted Ben Simmons, and because Daryl Morey and Elton Brand were not directly part of the process, right? And Morey, even though Sam Hinkie's his guy, he wasn't here. You just have to wonder, is there a part of the 76ers that looks around and says, maybe it's just time for a change? And just like the Detroit Pistons had to do in the 1980s, they had to make a tough decision when they traded the Adrian Dantley, Mark Aguirre deal. This might be a similar situation where you just have to make a trade in order to move forward. You know, remember the Lakers, they had to move away from Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones before they end up having the Shaq and Kobe dynasty. Sometimes teams have to make a move to get them past a certain point. Just some things to think about here on a Thursday night. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get more into this, the NBA Finals, and more with NBA Insider from Bally Sports, Brandon Scoopy Robinson. He joins us next here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show and comment as we are live in the Matt Blatt Kia studios.
The NBA Finals continue.
Booker, bodied by Tucker, lifts it for the rim. One shot by Giannis on the alley-oop for Tip.
After dropping games 1 and 2 in Phoenix, Giannis and the Bucks respond with 2 straight in Milwaukee. Now the series returns to Phoenix for a pivotal Game 5. Game 5 of the Suns and Bucks. Coverage begins Saturday at 8 Eastern on ESPN Radio. The NBA Finals, exclusively on 97.3 ESPN FM, South Jersey's sports leader.
On some models excludes Corvette with GM financing, excludes prior sales. See dealer for details.
By now, most people know that nobody beats a Bennett Chevrolet deal. Because when you buy a new Chevy from Bennett, you pay the same as any GM supplier employee pays. That's right, not 1 cent more. Plus, Bennett gives you all the rebates that can add up to 25% off MSRP. That's up to 25% off. And of course, Bennett Chevy has 0% financing available. Think about all the ways you save at Bennett Chevrolet. Plus, right now, we want your trade. So we're paying a minimum $7,000 for any clunker. You heard right, a minimum $7,000 towards any pre-owned in stock. Nobody pays more than Bennett. You can imagine how much more we'll pay for a good trade. And there's more. You'll never feel any sales pressure and never waste time with stressful negotiating because our non-commissioned sales staff is paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. Nobody beats Bennett Chevrolet, and we mean nobody. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
Why would someone looking for a mortgage at the Jersey Shore take a loan from a company in Detroit or North Carolina or some other far-off place? Online mortgages promise a lot, but don't always deliver. First Bank of Sea Isle City knows the Jersey Shore. We are local lenders. We use local appraisers and provide in-house processing. We understand the unique obstacles of financing in Cape May County. Don't take a chance. Local banking is better. Let us guide you. First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We will be joined by our guest here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN next. He is NBA insider Brandon Scoopy Robinson. Bally Sports, check out his latest work over there. NBA Finals tied 2-2 is the Bucks and the Suns. Home teams holding steady. Also, we'll get his perspective as well on the latest Ben Simmons brouhaha, but he joins us right now on 97.3 ESPN. Brandon, my friend, how you doing today?
Busy. How are you?
I hope you didn't dress up for me.
Nah, I literally have been up since. Well, of course I dressed up for you, but besides that, I have been very, very busy today. Taping interviews, hosting live shows, doing Instagram lives with Lisa Ann, and I'm glad to add you to just a very busy day that is a Thursday, and I got one more interview after you, and I'm done for the day.
Well, I'm glad you could fit me in because I always appreciate you making time, my friend.
Of course, a pleasure, and you always allow me to be myself, so I won't complain.
Well, speaking of yourself, you wrote about over at Bally Sports about the fact that, the Bucks, they're starting to find themselves. Those first two games in Phoenix, it felt like, okay, Phoenix, they knew what they wanted, but the Bucks came home and found themselves. And when you have one team that has 17 turnovers in the Suns and the other team only has 5, it seemed like the Bucks realized if we just play and do what we do, we can win this series. And it seemed like simpler is better for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Simpler is better, and I'll add this. Essentially, the Bucks gave the Suns a taste of their own medicine defensively. And I'll add this, in a world where the Suns said they were going to build a wall, it seems as though the Bucks built a wall of their own on guys outside of Devin Booker. And caused, Chris Paul, particularly last game, but overall the last 3 games, to turn the ball over about 15 times the last 3 games. And it seems that, if I'm Devin Booker, I'm a little upset because, man, I scored 42 points. I put all my drapes, I put all my fine china and linen on the dining room table, and we lose. What part of the game is that? So, you're a bit frustrated, but I'll add this. You didn't ask, but I'll tell you. Chris Middleton for the Bucks. You can't speak enough about just how important he was for Game 4, 40 points, and in a world where everybody's going to pay attention to the block that Giannis had. Middleton was really the caveat or the straw that stirred the drink, at least in this game. And he needed to come alive because he's been lacking the last few games. And if I'm him, Groundhog Day has to be every day, the Game 5, Game 6, and potentially Game 7, in order for the Bucks to potentially win their first championship for Milwaukee since 1971.
Yeah, you wrote about Chris Middleton, about that specifically over at Bally Sports. And just to follow up on that, I mean, his story in and of itself is amazing. Like, he's got to be some sort of movie someday, right? Like, his story of where he came from, where he is now, and he's on the verge of winning an NBA championship. I mean, he has to be on the list of most unlikely superstars to win a championship in league history, right?
Do you consider him a superstar?
I think he's playing like it for sure.
Okay. Well, then if that's the case, then yes, you're right. But aside from that sentiment, which I respect, I think that Chris Middleton is earning his paycheck. And you saw glimpses of it in the playoffs even last year when Giannis went down and the Bucks played the Heat. I think that ultimately, when it comes down to it, the Bucks The Buck didn't stop here. They got the win. And we go to Game 5 in Phoenix with a plausible chance for the Bucks to win it. And I think that the not just Middleton, but Bobby Portis is his story I really enjoy. Brooke Lopez quietly the last 2 games has stepped up. But I will add this: the last 2 games let me take a step back. The last game was not about the point guard play. The last game was about swingmen. But I think moving forward, particularly in Game 5, I do think that Phoenix is going to clean up their act some. In my opinion, I think Phoenix is going to win Game 5. But I do think that this does legitimately have a chance to go Game 7 games. And I think just for basketball and how much we've experienced the last year and some change, it would be great to see, just to have that experience. It's just a great time right now with USA basketball revving up, as well as international basketball, not just USA basketball, international basketball, as well as just the NBA Finals and the WNBA. They had their All-Star game last night as well, so a lot going on.
Hey, the WNBA All-Stars took down the Olympic team. I mean, that doesn't tell you how much talent there is out there in the women's game. That the All-Stars team, who didn't make the Olympic team, took down the Olympians. The women's league is in pretty good shape, in my opinion. That's just my perspective. But Brandon Scoop B. Robinson joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, at Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram for all of your NBA coverage and the full Scoop B experience. Brandon, I want to ask you a bit of a bigger picture question on these NBA Finals, because I was having a conversation about this with somebody the other day. Typically in the NBA Finals, there's like somebody who people are specifically rooting for or against, right? There's a villain, there's a hero, something along those lines. And it seems like with this NBA Finals, this is like the first time since, I would say, the Pistons and the Spurs about, 14, 15 years ago, that there's really no bad guy here. There's really no villain. There's really nobody you're like, I can't stand that guy. Like, there's a party that's like, you want Giannis to win. You want CP3 to get his ring. You like Devin Booker. DeAndre Ayton's likable. Chris Middleton's a nice guy. Like, and I think it's just such a strange, unique difference than what we've been used to for the last decade plus.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that pot, I was discussing this with Lisa Ann. We do an Instagram live show every Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern time. Lisa Ann Scoop B, and I was mentioning to her that this is the first time in NBA history that you've had multiple players scoring 40 or more in a game. Giannis did it twice. Devin Booker scored 42 last night, and then you had Chris Middleton as well, who dropped a 4-0. So I think this series has a lot of parity. Has lack of parity. Usually we're depending on LeBron James to entertain in the finals, or any iteration of the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry and more. The last time we really saw that was in 2019 when you had, the Toronto Raptors and the Golden State Warriors. You still had the Warriors. The only time I can think of anything different probably was in 94 and 95. And technically 94, the Knicks were, New York, and 95 was Orlando. You think Orlando, you think of Disney, and you look at the Rockets. So, when I look at this series right now, it really feels like just a local market mom and pop team, which isn't a bad thing. Like, it's cool to see something that's different than the ordinary. Smarter than the average bear. I don't know how that fits there, but I just felt led to say it. But ultimately, I think for this NBA Finals, I like to see new stars. I like to see guys who have grown. And I'll add, when you look at the Suns, I mean, this is a team in Phoenix that went from being the opening act in the bubble last year to now being the final act in a concert, and you look at and then I'll add this, Chris Paul could have joined either the Bucks or the Suns via trade this offseason. And Drew Holiday, ultimately was on Giannis's list as well of teammates that, he was looking to pair with and make happen. And so, you look at just what the Suns and the Bucks did in the off season to prepare for this now. Here we are right now, everywhere you want to be. And it's cool to see. It's cool to see other markets outside of New York, Los Angeles, chase a championship.
NBA insider Brandon Scoop B. Robinson joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, at Scoop B on Instagram and Twitter. Let's flip it over to the Ben Simmons thing, which seems to never go away. It's constantly spinning in circles. It's like a whole new planetary axis going on by itself. So the latest thing we have now is that Israel Gutierrez of ESPN put out there that Ben Simmons is not a likable guy, that people don't like him. And I'm wondering, I don't even know they're fully accurate. I'm not saying he's lying, but I'm going to ask you, isn't there sometimes the perceptions people have of somebody that because they're maybe from a different background, they're a little aloof, maybe they want to hang out with the boys all the time, that they are viewed a certain way? And because we know Jimmy Butler is very chitty chatty, he's very vocal, that, maybe Ben Simmons isn't a bad guy, but that just he's rubbed certain people the wrong way because he's different than them.
I think for Ben, Ben has a very interesting. I don't know the point of view. I didn't read what Israel said. I actually don't know Israel. The only dog I have in the fight is in dealing with Ben was in the locker room last year in Philadelphia, and also running into him at parties. And I will tell you that Ben was very gracious with me early on in his career. And then as he began to get bigger and bigger, he would run from me. And so I think that there is a level of media savvy, media conscious, and just don't want to be bothered that he has. And I don't blame him per se on that. But when I see him in a media gathering and then I'm sitting with him at VIP, he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. And so I think it depends on what day you catch him on. I didn't read and did not see what Israel said. I'm only speaking from
really quick. I can play the audio for you here real quick. So here Israel. This is from the Greg Cody podcast.
Okay. People don't like Ben Simmons in the league. His teammates don't like Ben. Like there's just something about him there. Like he is an unlikable dude. And
that's basically the gist of what he was saying.
That hasn't been my experience. But I have to respect what Israel's saying. I will tell you that when I was lobbying for Jamal Crawford to come to Philadelphia, and there was talk about it, he was very gracious in his responses to me, and was very receptive to that notion, to wanting Jamal there. I think he has his relationship with certain folks. But in my dealings with Ben, I have not personally had any bad issues, but you hear things, you look at the dynamics of, Ben and Joel Embiid, and people have made much of it. Me personally, just my observations, things I see, things I hear, and things I observe, I think that Joel Embiid is more of a fit in Philadelphia personality-wise, because I think he embodies that fan base. I've always felt that Ben's swag always screamed big market. But also Ben, to me, if you look at my reports from last offseason, and I said that Ben did not want to be in Philadelphia, but privately has had conversations. What Israel is saying is so retroactive to what I was saying to you and what I was saying on social media last year, because that Philadelphia fan base, they're very, very how they are. And I'll preface it that way. You read in between those lines. So when I look at Ben Simmons and I look at all of those things that, that are going on with him, I think that's Israel's point of view. I respect it. He may know something I don't know, but it's a lot to digest. And I think there's just a general consensus that maybe they need to move on. And I think Ben, if he leaves, will be better for it, because he'll be in a situation that fits his skill set. He's not a bad basketball player at all. Like, you just have to put the right pieces around him. And I think maybe Philadelphia and Ben Simmons have run his course, and that's okay.
Well, it's like I said, before you came on, I said, look, the Pistons don't win their championships in the 80s unless the Dantley-Aguirre trade happens, right? Shaq and Kobe, they probably don't get to where they are unless the Van Exel and Eddie Jones moves are made to ship them out of town, and so they're no longer involved in the situation. Like, sometimes you got to make a move to get you to another level, and to me, I've been saying that, and this is my opinion, I'm not saying I know it all, but to my opinion, I just think that Ben will never reach his potential in Philadelphia because I think he needs to change. Philadelphia needs to change. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Philadelphia has had not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 people in charge of that front office in the last several years. And the most current iteration was not involved in drafting him.
You are speaking the language of many within the greater Philadelphia area. And when I speak, people get mad, but you're basically echoing everything I've said.
Yeah, it's okay. Everybody gets mad at me all the time.
So I think with Philadelphia, there are conversations that are being had. Sacramento has entered the chat. Personally, I think Denver would be a great option but Denver has to be willing to part ways with Michael Porter Jr. I believe that if you bring in Ben Simmons to Denver, it moves Jamal Murray off the ball, and maybe he doesn't have to he doesn't have to distribute as much, and you can focus on him moving off the wing. I think when you look at Portland, if it's a situation where, the Blazers want to part ways with CJ McCollum, you do it. But at the same time, he's familiar with the Lehigh area, having gone there. But also, I still do think the Golden State Warriors are a viable option. But in order to make that happen, one, you're going to have to part ways with James Wiseman, but also with Andrew Wiggins. But also, I think Cleveland is an option. And I think that if there's a situation where you're able to move both Colin Sexton and Kevin Love, you do it, because Kevin Love is an expiring contract. And Colin Sexton, you could potentially move in there and really have a situation where you utilize Shake Milton a lot more at the point, and you move Sexton to the 2. And then you have a way to move Kevin Love's contract at the trading deadline.
What about the possibility of a 3-team trade? Because I know the one name out there that most Sixer fans are accepting of. Some of the names that could get out there, they're kind of lukewarm about, right? But the one name that's still out there is Kyle Lowry. And we know that there were conversations about the Raptors and the Sixers before the trade deadline. And it's probably the one.
There were?
Well, you said it.
I'm being sarcastic. Yes, those conversations were just at the trade deadline. Those conversations were at the draft last year. A year later, this is where we are, or a draft later, this is where we are. Kyle Lowry makes a lot of sense. Cardinal Doherty's own, Villanova's own. This is what I'll say to you. Yes, it would make sense, but the Lakers also make sense. Here's the thing: Kyle Lowry can be gracious to Toronto if he so chooses, because he won a championship with them, and give Toronto the chance to commence a sign and trade. If that happens, I feel like Miami would be a good option. I also feel like the Lakers would be a good option. But I believe that not only are the Lakers looking at Lowry there, I know they're also looking at Russell Westbrook, and I know that they're also trying to dangle the Kyle Kuzma conversation quite a bit, as well as Taylor Horton-Tucker. I think that when you look at the 76ers, it would be a great homecoming for Kyle Lowry. But I'll also add that I do think Kyle Lowry would be the most viable fit. It would be a revisit of a conversation that both the Sixers and the Warriors and the Toronto Raptors had at the draft, around draft last year. The only difference is that conversation was built around LaMelo Ball. And so things changed back then. Toronto highly coveted LaMelo Ball. It did not happen that way. There were some things that just didn't fit. And, I questioned some folks within the Sixers organization. And at the time they denied it. I think it's a different regime now. And I think certain folks might be more receptive to it. We'll see.
Now, before I let you go, you said different regime. I've been trying to explain to people, and maybe you could do a better job than me because you are the NBA insider, Brandon Scoopy Robinson.
Thank you. You're too kind.
Daryl Morey is famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, for finding trades when there's not trades. And the reason why I believe that Ben Simmons can be traded is because it's Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey unloaded Al Horford. Daryl Morey traded basically a bunch of dudes for Chris Paul, right? You have a situation where Daryl Morey finds ways to make deals, and I got to think that Daryl Morey is going to have some creative finger work all over any move that involves Ben Simmons this offseason.
Yeah, the way someone shared with me the other day, Philadelphia, and again, someone else said this to me, that the way Philadelphia and Houston were dialoguing about a potential move back in the wintertime, Philadelphia told Ben Simmons that he was traded. And then in the 25th hour, Houston was like, psych, and Brooklyn came and swooped him, James Harden, from out of there. I don't know if that's public consumption. I had a conversation with someone about it the other day. I think that I won't bash Daryl Morey, but what I will say is that that Houston Rockets thing, particularly in China, the whole China and that whole Twitter thing, frustrates some front office folks and definitely some players. And ultimately why, you did not see Chris Paul make a request to come to Philadelphia. That was a conversation. There were teams that were interested. Philly had interest in Chris Paul, but the interest was not mutual from what I understood. And part of it was also because of his relationship, meaning Chris Paul, with Morey back during their Houston days. And Houston wasn't just going to give up Ben Simmons to make Daryl Morey look good after he left and, parted ways. That situation with just all of that with China and stuff is a very sensitive subject. I could write a whole book about it. As it relates to finding trades, I have to give credit where credit is due. He was able to get Seth Curry. He was able to rid himself or rid the team of Al Horford's contract. And ironically, Al Horford ended up getting what he wanted from Boston from the beginning anyway, from that contract. I think it was like $109 million. So I think he's laughing all the way to the bank. But when you ask me specifically about Daryl Morey and you're asking me just about him having his pulse, I can't slide him. I can't sell him short. I definitely like what he did in getting Danny Green. But I think ultimately this Ben Simmons thing, I think they're going to handle delicately. Like, I don't see them just allowing a team to fleece them because they have the luxury of keeping him and they have the luxury of not moving him away. I think the Portland Trailblazers are in a very similar situation with Damian Lillard. They don't have to trade Damian Lillard. The Sixers don't have to trade Ben Simmons. So you're not going to just take any deal just because they say you should have it. I feel like that's what the Houston Rockets did with James Harden.
Really quick, you mentioned Damian Lillard. Before I let you go, real quick, people keep wanting to trade Damian Lillard to the Sixers. And I don't understand why Portland would hire a guy in Chauncey Billups who was on Lillard's want list. You told me yourself right here and on multiple other places. You said Billups was the guy that he wanted. So was Jason Kidd, right? Well, why would you hire a guy that Lillard wants and then just ship him out of town the next day? Like, I don't understand why people think that's a thing.
Well, I do think that the Sixers should consider trading for Ben Simmons. I've said that for about a month or so. But I do think I just think that Damian Lillard is a loyal guy to Portland, and I think it's a very, very happy marriage that's had its peaks and valleys. Right now, you're going through that, and I think that in order for them to get better, they're going to have to match him with somebody. I like Chauncey Billups. I will amend this. I think Jason Kidd is who he wanted. I think he has a respect, and I think the respect is mutual between Chauncey and Damian Lillard. But I think ultimately it wasn't his final decision. I think that's who he settled for. I don't think he's a bad pick, but I do think that the Blazers have a lot of work to do. And if they trade Damian Lillard, if they trade him, I believe that Chauncey Billups will be in a very similar situation that Steven Silas is in.
Yeah.
Having to build a program from scratch.
Yeah, and that's not something that he signed up for. Just like it wasn't something that Steven Silas signed up for. That's for sure.
So, yeah, man, I again, Portland does not have to trade Damian Lillard, but they do have the right to make that roster better. And if I'm Philadelphia and if I'm Portland, I pick up that phone and try to make something happen. And neither of those teams have to give up their star player to make it happen. So it's going to be a long, arduous process. The New Orleans Pelicans, as it relates to Ben Simmons, is also a team you need to be looking out for as well.
He's Brandon Scoop B. Robinson at Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram, NBA Insider, Bally Sports. As all guests, he appeared right here virtually here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter as he joined us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN with that sharp outfit that he's. I know you got one more hit to do. Keep up the great work, my friend. I appreciate you jumping on as you always do. Take care of yourself, all right?
Brother, thank you, as always, for allowing me to be myself. I'll see you later.
Take care of yourself. There he is, Brandon Scoopy Robinson, joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. All right, we'll get to your guys' thoughts and comments as we wrap the show. He dropped a lot of stuff on us there to consume and to work through there. So we'll get to all that as we wrap up the show coming up right here. 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. All of the news you need about Ben Simmons, the Phillies, the Eagles, the Flyers, high school sports. It's right there on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Download it for free. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And of course, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We'll get to your guys' thoughts and comments next. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night.
The NBA Finals continue.
Booker, bodied by Tucker, lifts it for the rim. One shot by Giannis on the alley-oop for Tim.
After dropping games 1 and 2 in Phoenix, Giannis and the Bucks respond with 2 straight in Milwaukee. Now the series returns to Phoenix for a pivotal Game 5. Game 5 of the Suns and Bucks. Coverage begins Saturday at 8 Eastern on ESPN Radio. The NBA Finals, exclusively on 97.3 ESPN FM, South Jersey's sports leader.
Why would someone looking for a mortgage at the Jersey Shore take a loan from a company in Detroit or North Carolina or some other far-off place? Online mortgages promise a lot, but don't always deliver. First Bank of Sea Isle City knows the Jersey Shore. We are local lenders. We use local appraisers and provide in-house processing. We understand the unique obstacles of financing in Cape May County. Don't take a chance. Local banking is better. Let us guide you. First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Some models excludes Corvette with GM financing, excludes prior sales. See dealer for details.
By now, most people know that nobody beats a Bennett Chevrolet deal. Because when you buy a new Chevy from Bennett, you pay the same as any GM supplier employee pays. That's right, not 1 cent more. Plus, Bennett gives you all the rebates that can add up to 25% off MSRP. That's up to 25% off. And of course, Bennett Chevy has 0% financing available. Think about all the ways you save at Bennett Chevrolet. Plus, right now, we want your trade. So we're paying a minimum $7,000 for any clunker. You heard right, a minimum $7,000 towards any pre-owned in stock. Nobody pays more than Bennett. You can imagine how much more we'll pay for a good trade. And there's more. You'll never feel any sales pressure and never waste time with stressful negotiating because our non-commissioned sales staff is paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. Nobody beats Bennett Chevrolet, and we mean nobody. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night, 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, live in the Matt Black Kia Studios. Matt Black Kia, they want to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Also comment on the stream if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Get you guys thoughts and comments in just a moment. Just want to hit on a couple things that Scoop B said. I think it's fair to say that, if somebody perceives something a certain way, it's reality, as I always say. And he said it himself, it's not that Israel Gutierrez is wrong, but his experience might not be somebody else's experience. And listen, with this up with Ben Simmons, teams are interested. They're calling, and I think he's going to be traded. I think Ben Simmons will be traded sooner than later. I just don't know what he's being traded for yet. And that has to play out. We got time. By the way, Mike Gill looking at this news a little bit earlier. Game 4 of the NBA Finals going up against absolutely nothing last night, unless you count some random soccer game. They cracked the 10 million mark last night. So they had 10.25 million last night. That is the 6th most watched sporting event since the pandemic happened. Okay? So, a non-football audience, I should say, actually, since the pandemic happened. Still not a huge number. It's still better than last year. Still lower than previous seasons with LeBron and Steph. But listen, 10.25 million is a healthy number. And don't forget, that number, it may not include certain things. Okay? Remember, when you're factoring in these numbers when it comes to viewership, they may or may not be factoring in every avenue that somebody views something on, okay? Sometimes ratings, they don't include streaming numbers. Sometimes they include only certain streaming numbers. Sometimes they don't include all outlets. They just include viewership projections, right? So I tend to think that a lot of times when you see a number like 10.25 million, it might be a little more than that. We know that, in local markets, it was a 29.6 rating in Milwaukee, 25.4 in Phoenix. So that's the highest for any NBA game in those markets since 2001 and 2000, respectively. So people are watching this. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Joey D. and Ventnor chimed in on the text board. Says, Josh, I'm torn on Simmons. Who would you trade him for or not? DeRozan, Lowry, and picks. That's Joey D. and Ventnor. A couple things. One, not DeRozan. I think DeRozan is too similar of a player to Ben Simmons. You don't need another guy who is basically going to be a guy who doesn't shoot from the outside. You're not trading Ben Simmons to get a similar player. You would trade Ben Simmons to get a player that's going to change the dynamics of your team. I mentioned it earlier. When the Dantley-Aguirre trade went down, it changed the Pistons' offensive approach, okay? When the Lakers moved on or disposed, I would call it, of Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones, it was specifically to change the team to be more centered around Shaq and Kobe. When the Celtics went out and got Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett to join Paul Pierce, they changed the offense in Boston. I can keep going through examples. You make a trade to get something different. That's why I'm not in favor of DeRozan at this point in time. Now, Lowry, I'm all on board with getting Lowry. I'm a big fan of what he can bring to the table. I think he changes the mentality, the attitude of this team. But I still believe it'll be a 3-team trade. I don't see a scenario as of right now that the Sixers can make a 1-for-1 deal with the Raptors and get what they want out of the deal. I can certainly see the Sixers doing a 3-way deal with somebody if they were to move Ben Simmons. I would love to see Lowry come here. I wouldn't mind seeing De'Aaron Fox, but I think that all De'Aaron Fox is again, I've said this before, I think he's just a better version of what Tyrese Maxey can be. I think the Sixers want an established veteran. That's why when Scoop B said CJ McCollum multiple times, it makes sense. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night. I'll catch you tomorrow. Have a great night.
Hey, South Jersey, this is Billy Schwein. Tune into The Locker Room every Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon on 97.3 ESPN. Each weekend in The Locker Room, you will get passionate sports talk from a fan's perspective, along with interviews with some of the biggest names in sports. That's every Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to noon in The Locker Room with me, Billy Schwein, on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, because nothing could be finer than talking sports with a Schweiner.